This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Good morning, guys. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Hi, Amani. I am Amy Adams. I am the principal of Shell Elementary. And this is Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Sides. I'm the first grade team leader.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's nice to meet you guys both. I'm looking forward to learning more about you guys and your school, and to be able to share my teaching philosophy with you guys.
Well, we are just so excited to meet you. We have this first grade position available and we are having our interviews this week. So before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about our school. So I have been the principal here at Shell for 2 years now. And we have a great school here. We're part of an amazing school district, Plano ISD, and we truly feel that our school is one of the best. So we want to add teachers to our team who will continue to build our school and help our students to reach their full potential. That's what we're all about here at Shell. We put the students first, and every decision we make is guided by that principle of putting the students first. So our school's mission statement is, our school is uniting a community of self-directed, lifelong learners within a challenging and nurturing environment dedicated to excellence. And that kind of goes in with the Plano ISD motto of just learning through excellence. And so we try to go through that with our school. So we have a very diverse community here at Shell. We have lots of different nationalities represented, and it's also very important to us to support and just enrich all of those students who come from so many different diverse backgrounds. And I guess the last thing is that our school motto is that Shell students are ready, responsible, and respectful. And our Shell students are sincere, courteous, honest, excellent leaders and lifelong learners. So we're just a school that's really passionate about our students and also our teachers. We have some really great teachers here at Shell. And like I said, we're looking forward to adding another teacher to our team. So that's kind of the short story about our school. So we're excited to learn more about you. So I guess to get us started, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and just your teaching experience.
All right, well, I'm just excited for this opportunity. Thanks for having me again. So I started PASAR, which is the after school care program for Plano. And so that's where I got a lot of my work with kids initially. And that's when I decided that I did want to go ahead and become a teacher and go into teaching. So I did that as I went through college. I went to UTD and got my bachelor's in child learning and development. And then I student taught in first grade as well. So I'm excited to take what I learned from my student teaching. I have taught 2 years of second grade, which I absolutely loved. And that just brings me here to Shell, where I've heard so many great things about the school. I love the diversity that's here. I'm just really excited to have this chance to meet all of you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, Amani, can you tell us what is your teacher philosophy, please?
Yeah, so I feel that it's really important to make all students feel safe and welcome first. I feel like my teaching philosophy is, in order for them to make any gains in learning academically, they need to make sure that those solid safety foundations are there first. So my teaching philosophy is to make sure to provide that safe, tranquil, peaceful learning environment for my kids first, so that once they know that this is a safe place, we can go ahead and start putting the learning on top of that.
All right, so can you walk us through a day in your first grade classroom? And you don't need to go into all details for every single thing, just give us a general outline of what a day looks like in your classroom.
Yeah, so I envision having being at the door, right, as soon as the kids come in, and just checking in with each one as they come in, and then they'll get straight to work at their seats. And then we'll probably start off with like a morning meeting to kind of just get a little bit of, the stress of the day off of our shoulders and just connect with each other. And then I usually like to get our English, language arts, and reading block done the very first part of the day. So that's going to look like a lot of small groups and stations and rotations and hands-on learning, whether it's phonics or if they're working on scrambled sentences or whatever it is that each individual student needs to work on. And then we'll probably go into a whole group math lesson, a whole group math mini lesson with manipulatives and chart paper, and probably on the carpet where we're all talking and exploring and sharing our ideas. I like to include a lot of like movement in my teaching and a lot of discussion in my teaching. So if you were to walk in the middle of a math lesson, We might be on the carpet. We might be in think, pair, share groups. We might be rotating across the classroom to go and find a partner to share our problem solving with. And then I like to incorporate a lot of station work in math as well, just to make sure that I'm meeting with individual groups, and then they're also able to go and practice hands-on. For our science and social studies lessons, I usually like to start with another like a circle time meeting as well, just kind of talk about the prompt. So if we're learning about maps and globes, I just pass around our talking piece and I tell them, tell me everything that you know about maps, just to kind of activate that prior knowledge and just to get everyone ready and comfortable for the content that we're about to go through. And then I do love incorporating a read aloud every day as much as possible. So I know that when I was student teaching, we were able to do it like in the morning with a snack and story time, whereas when I taught second grade, we didn't really have time for snack and story. It was more like a working snack. So I would make sure that we put in a read aloud when they came in from recess. They would come, put their heads down on their desks. We would just open up a book and read. I think that's so important for them as well. And then as we get ready to go home for the day, we do a quick end of the day circle time, just to check in, talk about the positives, what they learned, and just make sure that I'm sending them home in a good place.
Wonderful. I also think that the read aloud is a really important part of the day that can sometimes be overlooked in the hustle and bustle of getting to everything. So just as a side note, do you have a favorite read aloud book that you have with your class?
I do. So I did, with my second graders, we did Wayside School is Falling Down, and they absolutely loved it. It was just so funny and hilarious. And then for first grade, I saw a new chapter book called Shivers, The Pirate Who's Afraid of Everything. So I actually ordered it on Amazon to read, if you guys decide to hire me, to my first grade class, because I heard that it's just one of those funny interactive stories that first graders tend to enjoy.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. Can you say it again? I'm going to actually write it down.
Shivers, the pirate who's afraid of everything.
Oh, okay.
So he lives with his family and they're all pirates, but they live on their little ship and he's just afraid of every little boom sound. So he's working on becoming a braver pirate.
I love it. I was observing in a first grade classroom this past week, and the teacher was reading Scaredy Squirrel, which kind of had the same message where he was very afraid of everything and the students were just very attentive. So I digress. I just thought that was a really important thing to do. So that was awesome. I guess next with Jessica, sorry.
All right. So you mentioned in the morning that you do your ELAR block. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically, how do you manage and run your small group reading instruction?
Yeah, so at my previous school, what we did is we used end of the year data to kind of put our new students into groups right at the beginning of the school year, so that even if I'm testing, I can still have a small group at my teacher table working on, if they're my low babies, they can work on, let's say it's letter recognition. So they'll just be working on some letter tracing and maybe some cards while I'm completing beginning of the year testing. And then what I do is I take all of that data to compose my group. So obviously the ones that are at my teacher table, they'll be grouped by ability. And then everyone else that's working at their stations is going to be mixed ability groups, so that they can learn from each other and model from each other, so that they're getting the instruction from me, but then they're also having a chance to teach and learn from their peers as well.
Okay, and then along that same line, how do you manage and run small group math instruction? Is it similar to your language arts block, or what do you focus on with your small groups for math small group instruction time?
So one of my goals this year is to make sure to be able to meet with, I've always done one group a day, but I love the way in guided reading you meet with multiple groups a day. So my goal for this year is to hopefully be able to meet with more than just one group a day. But again, the same thing, start with the data and the end goal in mind, figure out where my kids need to be and where they're starting, and then start my groups that way. So when they're with me, we'll be working on very specific foundational skills if they need those foundational skills. For my higher ones, make sure that we're still hitting the state standards, but how are we going to extend it for them, giving them a little bit more of a challenge so that they're still engaged. And so my goal for this year is to be able to meet with more than just one a day, so I can see a glimpse of maybe not every group every day at the beginning, but just kind of get more of an idea of what they are doing and how they're progressing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Amani, what are the most essential instructional practices that you use in your classroom?
Making sure that students feel safe. I know I mentioned that before, but I feel like that's just very important to make sure that they're in a good place, that we've taken care of all the basics that they need first. And then I've been really into whole brain teaching this year, and I've been learning a lot about how just to make sure that students are really engaged. And so I've been slowly integrating some of that into my instruction as well, just making sure to have as much student engagement as possible, whether they're in their small groups or we're doing our whole group lesson. So I think it's essential that they are, first of all, taken care of, their basic needs are taken care of, and they feel safe and ready to learn. And then once that's taken care of, they're actually engaged in the learning process.
Great.
All right, so we here in Plano, we use data a lot. We are a data-rich district, and we use all different types of data to guide our instruction for the whole class, for small groups, and also for individual students. So from your experience, can you just tell us how you assess your students, different types of assessments that you use, and then how you've already touched on this a little bit. So if you can just kind of expand on how you use data in your classroom. So it's a two-parter. How do you assess your students? And then how do you use that data?
Yeah, so we have our basic assessments that we do at the beginning of the year, like reading records. We do an M-class assessment that kind of screens for dyslexia and it also sees where our students are at the beginning of the year and how they're meeting their benchmarks throughout the year. And on top of that, I like to, I worked closely with a third grade team last year, and what they incorporated was something called exit tickets. So for each lesson that, let's say they had one standard that they taught for multiple days, at the end of those days, they would just print out a problem from, like, let's say if it was math, they would print out a word problem from the Lead Forward website with that TEK, with that strand in mind. And it'd be one or two questions. It would just be a quick informal assessment. Then we'd give them that exit ticket. They would complete it on their own to show how they solved, and then they would rate how well they think they mastered that skill at the bottom. So if they thought, oh, this was easy, it would be the thumbs up. If they thought, okay, I think I've got this, but maybe I need more practice, they would do the sideways thumb. And if they were completely lost, they would circle the thumbs down. And then I would take that, and as soon as they gave it to me, I would look through and I would have them explain whether they were right or wrong. I would have them explain their answer. And it was really cool to see how it boosted their confidence, because they knew if they were being questioned, it didn't necessarily mean that they were wrong. So they would go through and they would explain, and most of the time they would catch their mistakes as they were explaining if they did make a mistake. And then that was really powerful for me to see. And like, you don't have to wait for beginning, middle, end of the year to test to see who made progress, who didn't. You can get, it's like real-time data, who is getting it, who is not. And then sometimes you're surprised by the ones who didn't quite master it, because you think, oh, this student is very high, I'm sure they got it. But then you see that one little strand that they're really struggling with. And so it's awesome to be able to catch that right away. And so that gave them immediate feedback. And then what I was able to do with those that were struggling, or the ones who had mastered it, is for their morning work, I would throw in something the next day for morning work. So let's say half my class bombed the exit ticket. I knew that I had to put in that quick word problem for morning work. And then if there were some that completely mastered it, how can I change this up to still challenge them while we're still hitting the TEKs? So using the data, how do I assess different formal and informal assessments, and then being able to use it in real time and adjust my groups and make my groups fluid rather than only taking a look at the data 3 times a year.
Wonderful. And that sounds a lot like how we do things here at our school as well. So just to kind of give you a quick synopsis of that, as we do those same beginning, middle, and end of the year tests that you had mentioned, we also use M-class here at our school, which gives us a lot of good data and shows us some things about our kids that we normally might not see. We also do MAP testing. Are you familiar with MAP testing? You did that? Yeah. So we use that beginning, middle, and end of the year just to track our students' individual growth. And we use that to kind of dig in and see their skills. And then our teachers are also really big on, like you mentioned, using those informal assessments every single day. And I love how you said in real time, so we can know right away if they're getting what we need them to know, and then using that as quickly as the next day to reteach that. So thank you for sharing that information with us.
All right. So Amani, what do you do when a student is not grasping a concept?
So for a student that's not grasping the concept, first of all, I need to figure out where the disconnect is coming from. Something that my previous principal really was big on was lead forward resources, and she showed us how to, if your student is struggling with this standard right here, go to lead forward and find the breakdown of the TEKS. So what you can even do is see what they taught, what they learned in the previous grade level. So if they're struggling with this year's TEKS, you can kind of break it down for them and go back to next year, fill in those gaps, and then slowly build back up to this year. And I think it's really important, if they're not grasping a concept, you need to break it down and make it as concrete as possible for them. So whether that's going back to taking out the manipulatives or drawing the pictures, or doing whatever we can to make it more concrete for them. And then just making sure that we get lots of practice. Usually if it's right after that exit ticket, we can talk about it right then and there as I'm giving them that immediate feedback. If it's during small groups and they're not working, we're just going to have repeated practice until they start getting more confidence, and then they're able to do it again.
All right. So then to go along with that, we always have those students who are not understanding the concepts, and then we always have those students who already know the concepts, and those gifted learners who are at the advanced levels, which we have a lot of those students on our campus. So that's something we're always thinking about and planning for. So we are curious to know how you differentiate in your classroom for those advanced learners who have already learned or mastered different concepts.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite parts. So let's say that we're trying to make 10. I think that's a big standard in first grade. So we're trying to understand all the different ways to make 10. And so most of the students are using 10 red and yellow chips or counters, and they're shaking and dropping, and then they're counting how many red, how many yellow, and then they're slowly starting to build that understanding. Oh, every time I see 6 red, that's going to be 4 yellow. And then of course you have the students who they don't even need the manipulatives, they just already get it. So for those students, when they come up to me for my teacher table group, or even if it's whole group and I need to just give them a quick different problem, I would say, okay, if you already know how to make 10, let's think about how to make 10 using 3 different numbers. So then they would have to start focusing on, well, if I start with 3, how can I break apart 7 to still make it sure that it's 10? So they're still working on the first grade standard of ways to make 10. I'm just challenging them a little bit more by making more parts to it. Another thing that we love to use is numberless word problems. So then the students are able to go ahead and put in their own numbers. So we talk as a whole group. What are the clues? Is this addition? Is this subtraction? Are we joining? Are we separating? And then once we talk about that, we put them into their independent practice, and then they get to choose their numbers. So whatever numbers they're comfortable with, you'll have the ones that will choose 2 and 1 equals 3. You'll have the ones that will do 18 and 10 is 28. You'll have the ones that are trying to do 150 and 1,000. So that's another way that I like to differentiate. If it's like reading, let's say we're doing short I words, and I have a really high reader that's already into chapter books. Have them come up with 2-syllable words. Have them, read their chapter book and find as many short I words as you can, but then sort them by syllables. This is 1-syllable short I word. This is 2-syllable short I words. This is 3 syllables. And then if it's like science or social studies, passion projects is something that the kids really love, just finding a topic that they're interested in, going and researching and giving them a couple of options on how they want to present their information, whether it's a poster or do they want to do like pretend to be a news reporter and give a news report on what they learned, or make a pamphlet. So different things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, Amani, can you tell us, how do you determine if a lesson was effective?
Student feedback for sure. I think it's really important to recap at the end of a lesson with the students. What did we learn? How do you guys feel about it? I mentioned exit tickets, but that's another quick way. Everyone take out a piece of paper and, draw a picture of what you learned today, and then have them describe it to a partner and circle the room and kind of listen in on see if, are they hitting the main things or are they completely off target? And just making sure to have, give them the opportunity to talk, give them the opportunity to discuss, because sometimes and give them that think time, because sometimes you ask them a question and they completely blank. If you tell them, okay, turn and tell a partner what you guys just learned, you give them a second and then they start talking, and then you just hear the whole thing come out and you say, yes, okay, they totally understand that, but you wouldn't have known that right away if you just looked at their face and didn't give them that time to think about it. So student feedback for sure, informal assessments, checking in on the kids. How do you guys feel? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
That sounds
Our next question is for you to please describe your classroom management philosophy. And this has everything to do with building relationships with the kids, how you handle behavior issues, and just how you run your classroom as a whole for that classroom management piece.
Yeah, so I mentioned about the whole brain teaching. And so one of the things that that I thought was so profound, I don't know how I would forget about this so easily, is how important it is to go over your classroom rules daily. Like just pretend it's the first day of school every single day. And just during that morning reading meeting, do a quick rundown of the rules and the classroom expectations. And then so for my posted classroom rules, we have some gestures that we do with them. So if rule number 1 is follow directions quickly, they do follow directions quickly like they're running. And then that it just hits so many of the rules for the day. Rule number 2 is raise your hand for permission to speak. So they say, raise your hand for permission to speak. So we run through those rules with the gestures. And then we do a lot of positive reinforcement, of course. Any positive thing that we see, it's really cool once the kids get into it as well, because they see you giving compliments for behavior and then they turn around and they compliment other students for their behavior. It's a game changer. And then, so let's say you do have someone who's not quite mastered the rules. Instead of calling out that student, you can say, class, what's rule number 1? And then they all say, follow directions quickly, even the one that was not following directions quickly. But when they hear that, it's like a great reminder for them to get back on track. And then for the students that do need a little bit more redirection, a quick consult with like a little conference with them one-on-one. Just making sure that they know that we want to stay as positive as much as possible and make sure to just keep building on that classroom community. I think that's the important part, is that classroom community, making sure that we all know that we're all here for each other and we're trying to make each other stronger.
Absolutely. And that's really important here in our school as well. It's building that classroom community to encourage best student behavior. So Jessica, do you mind talking about how you run your classroom and your classroom management philosophy here at Shell?
Absolutely. So a lot of what Amani said is what I incorporate in my classroom as well. We talk a lot about those SEL strategies, the social emotional learning. So every morning we're also doing a classroom meeting. We might be focusing on different skills and different techniques of things that we're trying to practice. For example, we have some, different characters that we talk about with the unthinkables and the thinkables, and they're kind of like, almost like superheroes, good versus, bad. And so we talk about how, we don't want to be one way, like brain eater is one of them, for example, or this is something at our school. So we talk about what are some strategies that we can do to not get distracted and focus and be focused on our learning. We also talk about zones of regulation. So we talk about the different zones and what are you feeling right now. We talk about how it's okay to be feeling one way. But green is where we always want to be, like green means go. And so we always want to be in the green zone. So we talk about how to manage our feelings. As far as the classroom management portion of it, like Amani, you were saying, there may be times to have a one-on-one conference, whether it be, at the teacher table, quietly, or maybe it may need to go out into the hallway for a little bit more privacy. As you said, you don't want to ever just want to single them out. And so just talk about those, blanket statements, friends, what should we be doing right now? Just to kind of give them a reminder of what we all should be doing as far as the expectations. And I also agree with what you've been saying too, Amani. The first thing that we want them to feel is safe in the classroom. And so that's from the very start, from the very beginning of the year, we always want them to make sure that they are safe, they are loved. If they've had a bad morning or something, we want them to leave at the classroom door and say that you're at school, you're here now, you're at school now, and you're with me, we're gonna have a great day. And so just letting them know that once that they're in that safe learning place, then great learning can occur and it can take place. So I think that's how I would say my classroom management philosophy is.
It reminds me of something that I had read about. Instead of having one student who's having a really difficult time, we utilize something called a calm down corner that goes with those SEL as well. So if a student is feeling like they're not very regulated, they could go and sit down in that corner. In my old classroom, I had a little beanbag chair and some stuffed animals and some different fidgets that they could play with until they felt better. But another one was if a student is just not having a good day and they're just you're trying to give the positive, but there's not a lot of positive to focus on, you can give them a note and say, hey, would you run this down to Miss so and so next door? And so all the other teachers know, like, whatever is written on the note usually means that the student is like having a hard day, but you just pretend like you're giving them a job to do. So it gives them a change of environment. They're able to leave their classroom for a second. They go and talk to the other teacher, and then the other teacher can just check in on them and be like, hey, how's it going? Just have a quick positive interaction with that friend. They get a break, send them right back to class. And then that's like one way to just kind of shake up the mood for them a little bit. And hopefully they can get right back on track again after that.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's another thing that we utilize here at school. And Jessica is actually one of our go-to teachers, where if a student is having trouble, we do give those students the notes to bring to her class, and she can help reset them. And that's just a great way for them, like you were saying, to reset their mind and just give them that time to do that. So I love that you mentioned that.
All right. Amani, can you tell us, how do you build rapport with your students?
So aside from the morning meetings, we also keep a journal every day. So their journal prompt gives me a lot of insight on, what their background lives are. They love learning about like the lives of their teachers as well. So I like to share as much as I can with my kids, whether it's my son's soccer game or different things that are going on. If I'm going on a trip, I like to share things like that with them. So we just building that relationship, sharing with them, and then listening to them when it's time to share. I think that's a real big positive piece. And then just making sure to compliment them genuinely. Like every morning when they come in and we're doing our little greetings, if they're happy, they've got a really happy smile, I make sure to let them know, I love that happy smile you've got on today. If they had a bad day yesterday and they were worried about something, I ask about it the next morning. How did that situation go that you were worried about? So just lots of communication and lots of just sharing back and forth, just to build strong classroom community, both me with the students, but then with the students with each other as well. They can bring their journals to morning meeting with them and share. If they want to keep it private, they can keep it private. So I think that just helps build that rapport in that classroom community.
Wonderful. We also utilize the classroom morning meeting here at our school as well to give students time to share what's on their mind, and for us to learn from them, and then for them to learn about each other. And I do also completely agree that it's important for the teacher to share, so that the students get to know their teacher and they have that connection with their teacher. They absolutely love doing that. So and as a principal, I try to tell them a little bit about my life as well. I think that's really important. So our next question is, how do you motivate students to stay engaged in class? And I know that you've touched on this a lot with your whole brain teaching, so this is kind of a circle back to that. And then what do you do if a student is having trouble staying engaged?
So something that's really hard for me to do, I feel like I'm very one-track minded sometimes, where I have my lesson and I'm trying to stick to my lesson, but sometimes the kids just aren't feeling it. Sometimes they're tired, sometimes they're bored, sometimes they're just tired of listening to you talk. So another idea I got from the whole brain teaching website is it's a game where you tell them, okay, guys, it's teacher versus student. Here's the smiley faces, here's the frowny faces. I'm looking for students that are sitting straight and tall. I'm looking for students that are raising their hands and ready to answer. I want to see all 18 of you with hands in the air when I ask my next question. Are you guys ready? And then you usually are perking right up. And so basically what happens is you are challenging them to get as many happy face points as possible. So if I say I want all 18 students to raise their hands and answer this next question, and they all raise their hands, I'll say, oh, perfect, you guys earned a smiley face, and I'll go put a check mark. And so I'll say, okay, so my question is, how do I solve 5 plus 5? How do I solve 5 plus 5? Turn and talk to a neighbor. I want to see all students turning and talking to a neighbor. So just that like change in pace and that change in energy, and then telling them it's teacher versus student, it just totally changes the mood of the classroom. And then you go from very tired, lethargic students to suddenly, oh, okay, Ms. Alcock says it's time to play. We're ready to play. And so what happens is you keep the scoreboard kind of close. So every time they earn a smiley, if one person wasn't raising their hand when you asked for all 18 students, you say, oh no, we had one, or you don't say we had one friend not listening. You say, oh no, I didn't have all my students raising their hand. Let me put a quick check mark on my frowny face. And so you also teach them when they get a check mark, they say woohoo real quick, and then it's done. And then if they get a frowny face, they do a little groan. And it's just like, oh, and then it's done. And so you teach them how to do those quick, like half-second celebrations, and then we move on. So it's just this constant, they're like on the edge of their seats. Is it going to be the smiley faces that win, or is it going to be the frowny faces that win? And so you do that throughout the lesson. And then you try not to deliver instruction for more than a minute at a time, just to make sure that they're engaged and listening. And then at the end of that lesson, you count up the tiles, and let's say you have more smiley faces than frowny faces, which is the goal. You either get to roll a dice, or whatever your classroom or your positive classroom management system is, whether it's drawing a number to fill a hundreds chart, or rolling the dice to earn a prize. So in my class, we get to pull out a little number from the hundreds chart, and once we get 10 in a row, we get to earn like an extra recess or a dance party or things like that. So that's kind of how I just motivate them when they're just not feeling it, they need that extra excitement. And this with the whole brain teaching, it doesn't single your one students out that are not paying attention. It's all about the whole class being engaged and the whole class wanting to participate. And then the cool thing is that even the one who was having a little bit of trouble that needed, the whole reason why you did this was because of that one student that was having trouble, the whole class energy level boosts that student up too, and then they're able to join in on the incentives as well.
Wonderful. So that whole brain teaching hits the whole group as well as that one student. So I love that.
Amani, how do you make sure parents and guardians are involved and up to date on their child's education?
So especially with the younger grades, I like to send out weekly emails, just kind of touching on the basic big skills that we're learning for the week. We send out a weekly homework newsletter where they have, their phonics pattern and their sight words listed on it. For my low babies, I usually send a little book in a bag with information on how to implement all those strategies. We do a lot of, we also do like weekly 6-week updates on big picture concepts and things like that. We send out information for upcoming events. So I feel like it's really important to keep a consistent line of communication open with students. We always start off the year with a positive phone call home, just to make sure that, the parents know that we're on the same side and we're all there for the students. So just reaching out, having them just checking in periodically with parents and sending out the newsletters, and making sure that the homework helper is going home every day and it's being looked at.
Thank you.
All right, so to go along with that parent communication, we know that not all parents are the easiest to communicate, and that's just one thing that we have to deal with as teachers and administrators, is dealing with all different types of parents and families. So if you could just please tell us about a difficult situation that you had with a parent, and then how you handled that. And then also, after we talk about that, if you could share a positive experience you had with a parent, and what do you think led to that positive experience? So first, just to talk about that difficult situation with a parent and how you handled it.
Yeah, so this one's always fun to talk about. So a difficult situation with a parent, I guess that takes me back. It wasn't when I was teaching quite yet. It was when I actually did Montessori school before I even did PASAR. There was a student that I had, I guess, that had had an accident, and we put her clothes in a bag and we posted it right outside the classroom door. And I was relatively new at this point, so I didn't know that there was, when the parent comes to the door, you let them know, oh, look, there's their wet clothes right outside the classroom door. I wasn't a parent myself yet, so I just assumed that when the parents came and saw their child in different clothes, they would know to grab the bag. I wasn't quite sure what the situation was. So anyway, the mom of that child came, picked up her daughter and left, and it was dad that had dropped her off that morning. And so she had no clue that she wasn't even in her same clothes. So she came the next day and found a bag of just wet clothes that had been there for a whole day. And so she was really upset. She's like, it smells, I don't even want to take it home. I want to throw it in the trash at this point. who did this? And so I didn't remember that it was me. And so I told her, I'm not sure. I'll ask the other teacher who's who's in the classroom with me, and then I'll get back to you. And as she was walking away, I suddenly remembered. And she was mad. She was really mad. So I actually, as she was walking away, I was like, oh my goodness, it was me. I just had that memory. I was like, I'm so sorry. That's an awful problem to have. But that was totally me, my mistake. I will now know that anytime this happens, I will make sure to let the parents know right away, because I didn't think about what happens next. But so thank you for bringing that to my attention. So I think with her being so angry, it was a little bit intimidating at the beginning. But I think just being open and honest with her and kind of empathizing with her really helped de-escalate it. And then so I think any uncomfortable situation with a parent that I had after that, I was able to build from that experience. Just make sure to be open and honest with them, apologize where it's needed, and then talk about how to make it work, how to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then a positive experience with a parent. Usually it's just so awesome whenever you have the student in your classroom, and then that parent, it's almost like they vouch for you. Like they tell everyone that they know about, oh, my son or my daughter was in her class and they really enjoyed it. I had a parent this year whose younger sibling's friend is in my class. And when she saw me in the hallway, she's like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited that you're so-and-so's teacher. She's, that's my son's friend's daughter. And it was just really nice to hear that from her, that she was like, oh, you're going to love her. It's going to be great. So that's always nice.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, technology is a huge part of our world these days, Amani. So can you tell us, how do you incorporate technology into your classroom?
Yeah. So at our previous school, we have just moved away from our computers, and we have one-to-one Chromebooks. I know Plano's real big on technology, and you guys have the budget for that, so that's awesome. So we incorporate technology. So it's kind of a balance. We don't want to put kids in front of a screen for the whole day, but we also know that it is such a big part of our lives, and they do need to have the skills to be able to navigate the digital world. So we included at least one of our stations in both the reading block and the math block is going to be technology based. If we're doing a lesson on maps and globes, I'm going to have my kids holding actual maps, physical copies of maps in their hands. They're going to be going and looking at an actual globe, and they're going to be leafing through atlases, but then they're also going to have their Chromebooks out, and they're going to be on Google Maps, because that's the reality of the world that we are in today. We're not taking those hard copy maps with us anymore. So we're going to make sure that we're hitting the technology as well. So I just try and incorporate a lot of balance in everything that we do. For every lesson that we're learning, there's usually a technology component where the students are able to get on and practice their digital citizenship as well.
So collaborative teams. Teams are a very important part of Plano ISD. We put a lot of emphasis, and we spend a lot of time teaming with our teacher team. So like I said, collaborative teams are a very important part of the success of our school. So can you explain your philosophy on collaborative teaching teams, and then what you yourself bring to a team?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that everybody comes to their team with an open mind. I know we all have our own expectations of what a team should look like and be like. We have previous experiences that we think, okay, just because it was this way, maybe it should be this way again this year. So number one, I think it's important to keep an open mind and kind of be willing not only to contribute your ideas, but be willing to learn about how different teams work and how different teams do things. So one of the strengths I've always felt is I feel like I bring a lot of interesting ideas to the table. I feel like they're not necessarily my own original ideas, but they're, I like to look at different resources and things that I think is like things that I think that are applicable to whatever we're teaching, I like to share. So I think it's also important to be willing to share your ideas with others and not just keep them for your own class, because at the end of the day, it's what's best for kids. And I think if that's your driving force for everything that you do, it's going to show up in your collaborative teams as well. And then something that so that was what I bring to the table. And I just think that's what it should look like. Everyone, hopefully, having an open mind, being willing to share and listen, and then being able to be honest with each other. Like, that's really awesome what you just shared with us. However, I don't think it's going to work for us this year because X, Y, Z. So just being open-minded and honest.
Can you tell us about a time that someone gave you feedback and how you handled it?
So yes, I remember having a walkthrough one time from a principal, and I just, I think I'm a really strong teacher, and I guess it was funny not funny, but she came through when I had my reading groups, and my students were doing such an awesome job, and I left my reading group and I had them go back to their station. I pulled up another group. And then, so I'm running the whole thing and I think it went great. And then my principal tells me later on, she's like, I think it did good. Here's something that you can improve on. And my first reaction was like, but I thought it went so great. Like, what do you mean something I can improve on? And she was like, you did a good job. However, I think it's important for the kids to see you. Don't just sit at your teacher table and do your groups and send them. In between transitions, when you send your group, go ahead and get up and walk the room, monitor, let them know that you're close by, check in and see what they're talking about, see what they're, give some feedback on what they're doing. So I thought it was a good learning experience for me, that at first I was kind of like, what are you talking about? My classroom is great. And once I let her advice sit in for a minute, it made a lot of sense. And I feel like it really did improve my teaching. So.
So one last question. We're almost done. I know we have a lot of questions today, but our last question is, what are your strengths and your weaknesses as a teacher?
Yeah. So strengths, I feel like one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is being, I think I like to bring a lot of calmness to my classroom and my team, just, making sure that we all know that we're safe, nothing is too stressful, nothing is that bad. We're all in a good place as best, like whatever life throws at us, we're going to make the best that we can from it. And then so that kind of translates into the classroom as well. So my students might come to me in the morning dysregulated, but once they know that I'm their calm, consistent presence, that kind of melts away all the little stresses and stuff, so that by the time they come into my classroom, we are a calm and quiet and engaged classroom where we're able to share and we're able to learn and we're able to work together. So just that peaceful and that calmness, and I feel like my classroom management is pretty strong. Weaknesses, things to improve on, probably I would love to get better at thinking on the spot, coming up with, a student comes up to you and they throw something at you that you were not expecting at that very moment. And just not knowing what to do in that moment. I feel like I want to get better at being able to, and we can't predict life all the time, so it's a little unreasonable to say this, but I feel like there are some teachers who know exactly what to say and exactly what to do in the moment as soon as it comes to them. So I guess one of the areas I want to grow in is just being a little bit more, not being able to think on my feet quicker, I guess. I feel like I have to consult with another teacher, like, hey, my student just said XYZ, what should I do? And then they'll say something and I'll say, oh, that makes perfect sense. So I want to be able to just think on my feet a little bit faster.
Thank you for your honesty. I know that's always a hard question to answer. So that concludes all of our questions. Do you have any questions about us or our school or anything that Jessica and I can answer for you?
Yes. So I was wondering if you guys can kind of go through and when you guys ask, what do you do when a student is not grasping a concept? Is there any other, what would you guys do in a situation like that? How would you address that situation?
Jessica, would you like to answer this, for how you address that in your classroom?
Sure. So if a student is not necessarily grasping a concept, and if I am not quite sure of why they're not grasping it, then I love to go to my team and ask for their feedback and their opinion, like, have you ever had this same situation? Just consulting with them and asking them what are some best practices that they thought of that maybe I've never thought of before. So that will probably be my first go-to, is speaking with my team, asking what they did in their classroom, and seeing what worked for them and maybe what didn't work for them, and then kind of going from there. So using them as a resource would be my first go-to.
Thank you. And then how do you guys deal with if there is any, let's say you are on a team planning, and if there's disagreement on the team on what should be done, how is that usually handled at your school?
Well, that does happen. We have, teams that work very, very closely together, and it's normal for people to not get along and to completely agree on something all the time. So we try to build just upon the respect and of each other first and foremost, and then, like I mentioned earlier, just putting the students first. So sometimes that requires the team leader or an administrator to come in and just kind of reset it, to reframe it from, these are both good ideas, we can't come to a consensus, let's really ask ourselves again, what is best for kids, like what is best for our students, and then we try to come to some sort of agreement. And sometimes that requires a leadership member to make that decision for the team. But we really have some great teams here at our school, and they're really good about stepping back for a little bit, reevaluating, putting the kids first, and then coming to that agreement, because that does happen at times. So,
Nice.
yeah.
And then I did want to know how you guys run your small groups and intervention. Do you guys do like after school tutoring, or do you switch, like swap kids during the day? How do you guys deal with like intervention?
So we do the teaming with the kids. So we look at their data, we look at their scores, and using their MAP scores as well as their reading levels, we put the kids in groups based on their levels. And for the first 30 minutes of the day, the students do go to a certain member of the team to get that really targeted 30-minute intervention time. So that's different than the guided reading time that's in the whole group classroom, which is based on their reading levels. This is just like, one teacher will really teach to those higher kids and do those activities. We have about 1 or 2 teachers who do the on level students, and then we have 2 teachers who are targeting the below level students, like I said, based on their scores during that first 30 minutes. And then we also have guided reading in the classroom that the classroom teacher runs based on their students' reading levels.
Nice.
So, thank you so much for coming in to meet with us today. We have a few more interviews, so just to kind of tell us the process, so you know what we'll be doing here. We have a few more interviews for this first grade position, and then we will, by the end of the week, so by Friday, we will have made our decision, and I will contact you either way to offer you the position or not by Friday, just so you know where we stand on that. But we really appreciate your time, especially meeting with us via Zoom. And it was really nice to meet you. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys soon.
Okay, have a good day. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.